There's been a whole load of noise thanks to various high-profile interventions from Elon Musk on the subject of the Tommy Robinson Groundhog Day-like resurfacing of his ultimate imprisonment, again for contempt of court for breaching an injunction put in place to discourage him from republishing the evidence he offered in defence of that libel case his film Silenced was all about, which was all scrutinised and dismissed by the court, as I have done somewhat ad nauseum, and which Elon Musk has now done somewhat ad nauseum. This video is going to be about those additional matters like non-disclosure agreements and the Almondbury School's closure. You'll find chapter markings on the timeline here if you're watching the video on YouTube, but here is a little running order of the timings, so if you feel the need to jump, you can do. Before getting on to the NDAs and closure conspiracies, in terms of what was the real substance of his film, you might remember I made this little graphic which leads you from one small part of one of the claims in the film to the film content in witness statement form in court, and from that to the court's scrutiny and ultimate dismissal of that claim. That is just one tiny illustrative representative part of the whole thing, which he then republishes in so-called contempt of court. This is a description of the charge. In general terms, a person to whom a court order is addressed is guilty of a contempt of court if they breach the court order, referred to as civil contempt, and was then given a 9-month prison sentence after he accepted the charge. So on that sentence, in any case where a court has power to commit a person to prison to contempt of court and no limitation applies to the period of committal, the committal shall be for a fixed term, and that term shall not on any occasion exceed 2 years in the case of committal by a superior court, or 1 month in the case of committal by an inferior court. The sentence resulting from the correctly imposed contempt charge, as you saw, was as per the rules, as you saw, and it doesn't matter how much you shout, cheer and scream for Ben Habib or whoever else is currently making mischief at other people's expense, the charge and the sentence were fair. And Tommy deserved it, and quite frankly, for what he did, deserves a lot more. So, be a bit careful what you wish for. In the middle of all this general madness, I came across this short clip, which does not seem to pursue the lost cause of Tommy's defence somehow being successful, but talks about one of the additional matters which I mentioned above.
He's in prison now for showing the Silence film in Trafalgar Square on the 27th of July. And I think anybody that watches that film can see very, very obviously that there was a cover-up as a result of the mass hysteria that exploded over the Syrian boy having some water poured on his face in a playground scuffle, and the extent of the damage that did to families, to children, and so on and so forth. That's what Silence is about. That's why Tommy's in prison, because there was an injunction against him putting that film out that showed undercover footage of school teachers, different people involved in that case that had basically been paid to keep their mouth shut by either the local authority or the state or whoever it was that paid them.
He talks about a cover-up by means of non-disclosure agreements, although it's not actually clear what he's suggesting has been covered up. Here's a 30-second clip from the film.
We put in a freedom of information request to Kirklees Council to find out exactly how much they had spent of taxpayers' money to get the silence of their staff. They didn't answer the first request. They avoided the second. Only when we sent them legal letters, because they have to by law answer these questions, did we get our answer. They had spent over £250,000. Nearly £275,000 of taxpayers' money was spent making people remain silent.
This claim is not justified. This is the sheet you saw in the film. Column E is pensions, F is redundancies, the key one is G, ex gratia payments, and on the far right, K, you have the total number of ex gratia payments. Ex gratia payments are made outside of statutory obligations like redundancies and pensions, and NDAs would be listed in that column if they were anywhere. You can see that there are just 3 councils out of the total on those 2 sheets, which are static on the film and which I can take screenshots of, with 0 for ex gratias with positive numbers in other columns, that one, and that one. So these kind of payments aren't unusual. Absolutely everybody is doing it. Also bear in mind that these payments are made across the whole jurisdiction for the entire year, not just for one entity like a school on one particular occasion. Kirklees ex gratia total is that one, 274,000, distributed to 19 people in total. You might notice that directly above Kirklees is Kingston upon Thames, quite a geographical way away, and a similar annual total, 385,000 for 23 people. So that's a slightly bigger total of similar amounts per head in comparison to Kirklees. Obviously Kingston upon Thames is not dedicating its entire annual total for covering for Jamal Hijazi in Huddersfield. Point is, these payments are very common and they're countrywide. Tommy is in no position to say exactly what that 274,000 total is down to. He claims it's NDAs to cover for Jamal. We don't know that, and for him to claim that he does know does not stack up. Equally, to claim that they are not NDAs is also unjustified, so both Tommy fans and Tommy haters strike out on this one. We don't know, but
nearly £275,000 of taxpayers' money was spent making people remain silent.
that claim does not stack up. In the film there are 3 people who claim a total of 4 NDAs. You had the ex-teacher Paul Kumar, ex-headmaster Trevor Bowen, and an ex-head of governors who claims 1 for herself and 1 for her husband. So this is those 3 squeezed into 60 seconds.
So they seem to be pretty keen on these NDAs.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Kirklees Council. But I can't disclose that with you.
Like what?
Loads. I'm saying I can't disclose it because I signed it.
How much money is it?
I can't say the figure because if I say the figure, it
Okay.
goes out.
Because mate, 18.
I've got a problem here. I lost my job over this, and as a result the council has told me that I cannot speak to anybody ever about it. So unfortunately,
Well, you lost your job over the Jamal Bailey thing.
I was there when it happened, I was there when I dealt with all the situation.
My view is that you won't get much of an answer out of Rob because you work there and he's bound by various confidentiality, so...
Non-disclosure agreements. Do you get paid as well?
Not going to comment.
But the head teacher can't even talk about Jamal at all.
No, neither can I.
Neither can you. Did you work there as well?
No, I was the chair of governors there.
I have no reason to dispute these claims, they seem entirely genuine, and I also don't dispute the claims that they make elsewhere, that other people received settlements with non-disclosure clauses. But we still don't know why. These ex gratia payments are made when your employment ends, and the entire staff at the school, their employment ended when the school closed. So why did the school close? This is the headmaster at the time, Trevor Bowen.
That incident was talked about by Theresa May at a G20 summit. Somebody asked her a question about it. We were then Ofsteded by 5 of the top inspectors in the country. Then only sent 1 registered inspector. We had the head of safeguarding. I had Amanda Spielman, the head of Ofsted, speaking to me about it. If you want my honest opinion, they said, get up there, this is, I don't know who they is, get up there and shut that school. Get up there and get rid of this.
Get rid of the problem. Over the Bailey.
Correct.
Over Jamal.
Correct. Get up there and get rid of it.
My opinion, they said, get up there, shut that school down and get rid of this. Tommy prompts, over Jamal, and Mr. Bowen says, yes. The head is claiming that Ofsted went to the school and to shut it down to stop the staff talking about the Jamal issue. Mr. Bowen also has connected opinions on his termination, as you saw in that other clip. And this is the only occasion where somebody makes that particular connection.
Well, you lost your job over the Jamal Bailey thing.
I was there when it happened.
You lost your job over the Jamal Bailey thing, asks Tommy, and Mr. Bowen gathers his thoughts, gazes briefly at the sky for some inspiration. There is then a cut in the video. That's the frame before the cut, and that's the next frame just before his response. And he says, I was there. So that's a slippery response following a cut, which might mean that something was deleted. We don't know, but it wasn't continuous.
Well, you lost your job over the Jamal Bailey thing.
I was there when it happened.
The ex-boss is trying to convey the idea that he lost his job over the Jamal issue, but without saying so, because he didn't, and that the school was shut by Ofsted to cover all this up.
If you want my honest opinion, they said, get up there and shut that school. Get up there and get rid of this.
Get rid of the problem. Over the Bailey.
Correct.
Over Jamal.
Correct.
The school was shut for two reasons. It was short of money and it was substandard, and not because of the matter that Tommy's libel trial revolved around. Nothing whatsoever to do with that. Shock plans to close inadequate Almondbury Community School as a high school. The council has called on Kirklees officials to apologise to parents and pupils at Almondbury Community School over plans to close it as a high school following a damning Ofsted report. This plan was not welcomed across the board, and Kirklees gives more details with their summary at the top of this document here. I'll just read this bit. At present, a total of approximately 300 pupils attend the secondary phase, which covers year 7 to year 11, and this means half of available places are not taken. Pupils equals money, and they were running at just 50%. Almondbury Community School faces major challenges with its breadth of curriculum and standards of education. In a recent Ofsted inspection, it was judged to be inadequate and requiring special measures. Low pupil numbers at both primary and secondary level have also placed the school in a position where it is very difficult to be financially viable. This restricts the curriculum, meaning some students are unable to pursue certain subjects and career paths. Then we get some questions and answers. My child enjoys attending ACS and we are happy that they are at an all-through school. Why are you proposing to close the secondary phase? And the answer, all through schools have many advantages, but the low pupil numbers across ACS have placed it in an extremely difficult financial position. It also faces a number of challenges with standards of education. If the proposals are eventually approved, all children in the secondary phase will be able to access a place in a nearby school. We will work very closely with affected families and take account of their circumstances so that each child is able to enjoy a high standard of care and education at their new school. We had the headmaster with his outlandish claim that Ofsted went in because of the Jamal matter to cover it all up and to kick him out. If you don't believe the council, take a look at their Ofsted history. This is the school, and if we start at the bottom, 2006, satisfactory, that ranking actually no longer exists. It seems to have been replaced with requires improvement. They came back in 2009, good, so back again 3 years later in 2012, good again, back again 3 years later in 2015, oh dear, requires improvement. And at this point the inspection frequency increases. Evidently what happens is when a school is doing okay, they have longer periods between inspections, and then when schools start to struggle a bit, they ramp up the inspections. So that was 2015, requires improvement. Back they come 2 years later, 2017, requires improvement again, oh dear, not doing any better. This was 2017, so guess what? They ramp up the inspections again and come back in 2018, which is now just a year later. And in 2018, inadequate. So as you see, we've reached the bottom of the inspection grade ladder. And what was that 2018 inspection? It was the one that Headmaster Trevor Bowen was saying was to cover up for the Jamal matter and to get him sacked. Can you see now why he's making this bizarre claim? From that 2018 report, effectiveness of leadership and management inadequate. Leaders have not taken effective action to bring about the improvements needed with enough urgency. Senior leaders lack oversight of whole school issues such as exclusions, racist incidents, bullying and behaviour. Since the last Section 5 inspection, leaders have not taken sufficiently rigorous action to improve the quality of teaching, learning and assessment. Leaders with the responsibility for safeguarding and pupils' welfare have not been sufficiently vigilant in using recorded concerns to identify pupils who are at risk of abuse or neglect. So the report pans the leadership, and the leadership takes refuge in a massive conspiracy fantasy. He did depart actually before the school closed. That's him around that time in late 2018, then by late 2019 he'd been replaced by Miss Ruth Ward. The school did show signs of improvement in the next monitoring visit, but the die was already cast and it closed, it seems, on the 31st of August the next year. The Ofsted inspections and the closure were nothing to do with Jamal. Obviously, what a ludicrous conspiracy fantasy is that? Clearly, Mr. Bowen's departure was something to do with the failing nature of the school. Was he pushed or did he go willingly? We don't know, but that is going to be the nature of his departure because the school was failing so badly. Armed with all that knowledge, rewind.
If you want my honest opinion, they said, get up there and shut that school. Get up there and get rid of this.
Get rid of the problem. Over the Bailey.
Correct.
Over Jamal.
Correct.
Do you now find yourself laughing where you weren't when I played that 5 minutes ago? If you want my honest opinion, they said get up there, shut that school and get rid of the Jamal problem. No, he is trying to deflect from the failure of his school and ultimately his own failure. The school, badly lacking money and failing, is shut down and the staff are made redundant. And this is the point where there would have been settlement agreements alongside the redundancies, with potential non-disclosure clauses included, listed within the ex gratia payments total of $274,000 for 2018-2019. There would have been quite a lot of resentment brewing around the time, so it seems entirely reasonable that the council might have said something like, look, we're going to give you an extra 16,000 or so if you just agree to keep stum about this. Stum about the fact that the school wasn't very good, the head wasn't very good, you weren't very good, we weren't very good. Hell, even keep stum about that flaming playing field incident with Jamal Hijazi and Bailey McLaren. Just keep stum about the whole thing. We don't know exactly. I don't know that, but neither do you, and it's a much more plausible hypothesis than they went in to shut down the school over the Jamal business. And we do know that Tommy's claimed certainty about those ex gratia payments being exclusively NDAs does not hold up, and the headmaster's claim about Ofsted and the school closure is complete madness. That does, I think, clarify things quite a bit. So, conclusion. I'm going to run through a few things here. I laid out the evidence that Tommy brought in to defend the libel charge from J. Hijazi Esquire that he went on to base his silence on in this little cheat sheet. And in terms of specifically that bit of the top one, I laid out its skin, bones, innards and just about everything else in this little work of art. This really is me making things as simple as it is humanly possible too, and I'm waffling here just a bit to give you some more time to look at it. Tommy could have approached all this from a position of honesty, and he could have gained honesty credits if he had, about things like, for example, his previous and his ongoing relationship with the McLaren family. He could have said something like, you know what folks, I know this is extraordinarily coincidental, but I actually know these people. The older brother of Bailey McLaren is actually a friend of mine from way back. I want you to know that. I also want you to know that I'm going to be approaching this from a position of absolute impartiality, absolute non-bias. I'm going to get to the bottom of it as a journalist. I'm going to do that, and you are going to judge me on my work. If you think I haven't done a good job, then you say so. If you think I've been impartial, which is what I'm going to be, then great. But that's what I'm going to try to do. Tommy didn't do that. Why didn't he do it? He could have also mentioned at some point in the film, he could have edited in the fact that he lost the libel case. He could have said something like, do you know what, I took this to court and I lost. Wouldn't you know it, I lost again in the British judicial system. What a surprise. Not. The judgment from that is freely available online. You can go and read it if you want to. I encourage you to. What I'm going to do in this film is I'm going to present to you the evidence that I brought to court, and which, by the way, the judge doesn't want me to disclose to you. I'm going to do all that, and I'm going to leave you to be the ultimate judge. If Tommy had done that, he would have lost nothing, because he knows as well as anybody that his fans aren't ever going to look at a court judgment. And he would have gained absolute honesty credits from everyone for saying that. But he didn't do that. Why didn't he do that? Because it's not his way. Tommy's way is not to be honest, because to be honest is to be exposed, and to lie is to be covered up. That's the problem. If you folks carry on following somebody with a long history, way before this, Day of Freedom, Cambridgeshire Police, all these things, many other things that I'm not aware of, certainly, you will always be disappointed, because actual reality will never be the way you think it is, because you've been lied to. And if you carry on listening to people who lie all the time, knowing that they're lying all the time, who is to blame if ultimately you're just disappointed again? And of course, also there was the fact that before going inside, he was merrily fleecing his gullible supporters with these what amount to fraud emails, making pleas for money on the back of false claims. Okay, yeah, that lot was for the Tommy haters. This is going to be for the Tommy fans. The judge was basically fair in his treatment of Tommy and his finding against him, remember. But he did show some bias towards Jamal. I thought I have spoken about this previously. He rejected some evidence which I thought he should have accepted. He let some things slide when it suited Jamal, which he didn't let slide when it suited Bailey. And there was some wording which I thought clearly showed bias towards Jamal. And I did this and more in detail in the video I made on propensity for violence, which I will put a link to in the description. A school location is always going to be a messy, unsatisfactory environment where things happen that happen, but which can't actually stand up in court. Well, I said this teacher, no, he said this teacher, what can you do about that? Who knows? There was no closed circuit TV. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. So this kind of environment is always going to yield this kind of unsatisfactoriness. And as an example of this, in the main evidence, he brought the specific evidence to violence against women. He brought the claim of a mother on the part of her daughter that she'd been bitten by the boy Jamal, and this was transcribed in court from what looks to be his Facebook page when he had it. She said what she said, but she subsequently changed her story. There were suggestions of threats leading to the switcheroo, which weren't substantiated specifically here, but were elsewhere directed at the McLaren lot from the local Muslims, going by the names. You can pause the video if you want to spend any more time enjoying these literary masterpieces. So it is perfectly possible, if not likely, that there would have been the same directed at that family, that girl's family, which is why she changed her mind. The trouble is, story changed, allegation withdrawn, no can do. Personally, I don't think it happened. I think it was a girl-on-girl thing. She did say that. She then included him in it, and then she changed her mind. It could have happened, but whether it happened or not, that wouldn't change its usability. The NDAs, we don't know. My guess is that they related to the closure of the school generally and the likely atmosphere of recrimination and bitterness that there was. Yes, potentially spiced up with the Jamal matter. You know, we just want to put the whole thing to bed, and now the school is closing, we can close this as well. But not exclusively because of it. Potentially, if it was involved, then wrapped up in it, a combination of things. Potentially, opportunistically, including, you know, a desire to put to bed that Jamal matter once and for all, to any extent that it wasn't already put to bed anyway. The school closure, however, not being bound by confidentiality agreements, we know was down to academic failure and financial troubles, being so badly undersubscribed. Nothing to do with Jamal. And you remember Headmaster Trevor Bowen saying, I lost my job over this. Well, actually, yes, he probably did, but for the actual reason, the failure of the school. Nothing to do with the Jamal Bailey playing field incident. And I think that's pretty much it. I wonder if this is the last thing I will ever say on this subject.